Thank you. I I would like to congratulate my table peers, Dr. Celso Cambilongo. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the opportunity provided of having you. IBDT, it's such a joy to have you here with us. I would like to thank the presence of Minister Grusel de Faria, whom all well know. It's one of the judges of Brazil, respected, admired by the whole legal community, but especially by us tax lawyers. So thank you to being with us during the closing of this Congress. Raquel, a friend of so many years, thank you for being here. And before passing the floor, I would like to disclose the closing of the thesis competition, thesis presented and judged yesterday. First, it was classified Dr. Hélio de Mello, with the subject the participation of users in digital services as a bargain and implications on income tax and IVA. So congratulations, Hélio. Second, we had transfer prices transactions with trading companies. Dr. Ricardo Marozio Gregori, congratulations. And third, the thesis agreeing by disagreeing treaties against double taxation as a mean to overcome diversity. Jefferson Ferreira Antunes de Souza, congratulations. Both three works will be in the annals of the Congress. So I pass the floor. Good afternoon, all, and it's a huge pleasure for the University of São Paulo Law School to receive this, to embrace this event and host this event, and at this table of closing of the event with the presence of the chairman, IBDD, Dr. Ricardo Maris de Oliveira, in the presence of Professor Raquel Novaes, and with the Magna Conference by the Minister Gurgel Farias. I could notice through the 3 days of our meeting, let's say, how intellectual effervescence, a dynamism, a set of complex issues that you could address here, talking about some opportunities with Professor Luiz Eduardo Schroeri, whom I would like on behalf of the faculty to record our thank you. That's very intensive, Professor Schroeri. Professor Schroeri, round of applause. He organized these meetings for a long time, approximately 20 years. This is the 10th meeting of international tax law done here at this university, always with this leadership of Professor Schweri. And when he did the first meeting, he was telling me today during lunch break, few participants, something like 80 participants during the first meeting, and the meeting now we close with the Magna Conference by the Minister Gurgel Faria. The current meeting we have more than 500 participants, almost an area that it's very important and relevant. Out of Brazil for 20 years amongst us, it was an area that was crawling, an area sort of area yet to be worked on. The work of IBDT, Professor Schweri, and many of those present in this process was absolutely This key so this area could stabilize itself amongst us, and being recognized and participated as we see in this meeting of these last 3 days. Tax law in Brazil has a level of specificity and sophistication of and difficulty that does not allow us say very easily that all ministers, even those very skillful, many we have in the Supreme Court and in the Supreme Federal Court, not all have regarding specific tax law the same skills that the minister Gurgel Faria has recognized as an expert in this matter. Not all, some have a higher vocation for different areas. It's natural to be so forth, but this evidences that even though in the Supreme Court's difficulties regarding national tax law, domestic afflicts is a concern even those jurists of huge knowledge and very important. If you have this complication that per se is huge within the internal scope, what to say regarding when we have all these difficulties, they are added to problems related to taxation, international taxation, better saying. For this purpose, the insertion of an economy like the Brazilian economy within the international world order in a globalized world, all this has for the those that practice law as attorneys at law, judges, or legal operators in an overall, a Congress like this one has a huge importance for a country like Brazil. Therefore, we are in the closing session magna class following, but I would like to record here our deep thank you to the University of Law, IBDT, Professor Schueri, all those that, as a visionary, for some years ago started to develop amongst us this area of tax law, international tax law. The university owes a lot to you all. So, thank you very much. I pass the floor to the Minister Gurgel de Faria for the Magna Conference. Professor Ricardo, Capilongo, Doutora Raquel, I would like to speak standing up, and I will address all of you standing up who are here, congratulating you all this end of afternoon. I could not say it's an evening, but to record my how pleased I am to be here in this event by IBDT in the University of Law in Largo São Francisco. I would like to feel all congratulated through the members of this table, but I could not disregard the record and personal to the president of IBDT, Dr. Ricardo Maris de Oliveira. I cannot forget that last year we launched a book by Abad in my honor, and you were one of those who wrote an article in this book exactly to be part of this book. So it was a huge joy to count with your article. I could also not mention Professor Schwery, who invited me directly and also cheered me with an article in this work, an article talking about one of the decisions we have the opportunity in the case of dealing with it. Professor Capilongo, we had the opportunity of participating benches together. I told him, PhD benches at the PUC of São Paulo, he also visiting the university, so the joy of being together here once again. And as for the case, Professor Raquel Novaes, now in academic terms, but we were together in different opportunities, not as the judge, but as I was the judge, she was attorney, and it was a joy. It's a joy to see you again. Now I excuse all tax lawyers that I mentioned and the others to congratulate, feel all congratulate by Professor Sérgio Rosa, huge tax lawyer from UERJ School this year. He became head professor of the University of Rio de Janeiro, so it's a joy to be together here today in this event, which is not the first time I see Professor Schwer, but the first time ever in this room so noble. During the pandemic, there was an event, and I recall my table was held by Professor Quiroga, that we back then participated in the event. I don't remember the number, but it was involving our tax law, international tax law. What? Well, in the case, what are we going to talk? The proposal by IBTT is ruling regarding transfer pricing, and I will, in this case, let's focus on a ruling we had 2 years ago. It might seem a long time, but there are some nuances in 2023, 2024. It's important for us to share these details. I always like to say how I'm going to divide my lecture. There's something that happened during May this year. I was in an event in Madrid. I was participating because of legal safety and taxation. Perhaps some of you attended in Madrid, and it was fostered by the Bar Association School and the Magna class. The first conference was by the Minister Barroso. And those who attended his lectures, you know very well he has a very peculiar way of starting. First, he starts saying, I will divide my presentation in three parts. He says this, and normally he likes to do it divided in three parts. This time, at my side, I had Marcelo Manaval, minister, who's a friend, and then he said, I'm going to ask the head talking about with Minister Barroso, talking about security, and ChatGPT started to present. It's the ChatGPT, so I'm going to divide my presentation in three parts, and then, of course, not that well presented, was not equal to the Minister Barroso, but it was brief and well done by ChatGPT. Afterwards, I stopped dividing my presentation in three parts because I don't think that's ChatGPT that's doing my presentation. So I will divide in three topics, three chapters, and not parts. Initially, I start talking a bit by the history of transfer pricing. I know all of you are, we are before a selected audience used with international tax law, but I like history and to present a bit of the roots where it started the problem. And afterwards, after the historical side, the second chapter, not part, I will talk about the legislation, and then we will talk about the appeal which ruled this. It's 511,736. So you know very well we experienced a time where the event I attended in IBDT, others but disclosure, I thought it was, I remember it was an international congress. It was during the pandemic, and you know how the pandemic period was very difficult. But during the pandemic, obviously, we have to laugh a bit not, in order not to cry, difficult times. But during that time, there were some jokes and so forth. And one of the jokes that it became a meme is that COVID could not enter the headquarters of the STF, Supreme Justice Court, those are the STJ. No, to reach the merit is so difficult. Then, as the specific case during this appeal, it was not Sumula 7, but Professor Schwer must recall that way that first it was enforced in the office that it was not the federal legislation, it was not a federal law that would be appointed as a but a normative ruling, and there's jurisprudence on it, and some resolutions, infralegal acts that cannot be examined when we have a special appeal. But we checked when the subject was sent to the group. In fact, the statement of violation, this was directly on the law. So the normative ruling, without talking the merit, would be violating this law. So we could not do an analysis based on the instructions. So the law was lost, and so we could study the merits. So I say this Summa 782, 282, and so forth, 5 in other summulas that are enforced due to the avalanche of processes processes we have. The jurisprudence story is real, because if we are sometimes suffocated by the amount of processes, so we have this burden, so we could ingress in the merits. So let's see how, in fact, we have a bit this issue related to the historical side of things. I will not talk about the transfer pricing concept because I'm in front of professors regarding this matter. But on an overall, we know that the transfer pricing, in fact, they exist when before collegated related parties, multinational companies, that they have conditions of choosing the jurisdiction that would be beneficial for them for the case that can be taxed. So before this fact, the world like this starting now, I will talk about the historical part within the scope of USA. The world is waking up. It's not only business done with and trade internally. In fact, what we had before in a way that was more incipient now, in fact, is the normal law with globalization. The world as a whole is doing commercial transactions, and then companies that had their connections and their related companies, especially multinational companies, so an opportunity. So I'm going to do a transaction with a collegated company, what I'm going to then use as an artifact in order to be able to have a less taxation. Then I will export to a country but so the taxation there is low, and I'm doing a transaction with affiliated company, so my export price will be very low, and the higher taxation is over there because it's more like Dupont. Soon I will address. This was the first case, quite emblematic, that called the attention regarding this. Now, as for the import, I will go there and place that the price is higher. It was over invoiced. So companies related, affiliated companies, they have conditions to do this sort of adjustments and have a sort of lower taxation. Governments wake up and say, well, we have to bring a legislation in order to, in fact, this govern this issue. So where before these companies that are affiliated, related, I using this expression before it was more affiliated, now they talk more related, other expressions ligated, collegated, which is affiliated and related. These are concepts that exist. When companies are related, they can do this type of combination. They also, in the case, lower costs before that adjustment before those who know themselves. And I will say this pricing create here through a legal fiction. What's the price? Because in fact, if they were interdependent parties, this relation would be different and prices would be different. Therefore, what I want is to reach the transfer price, is trying to find the price that would be normal amongst parties that would be there fully independent. Historically wise, as I said, we start in USA. If we look back then at the beginning of the last century, always 17, there's something regarding transfer pricing, but in reality, in 68, we have a legislation which is truly that comes and discipline the topic regarding transfer pricing within the code here, the tax code, international tax code over there in USA, of course, section 482. And the first case that my secretaries, they like to put these curtains. I don't like. I like faster things, but they enjoy this, so they prepare and they put the curtains and other things in the presentation. Well, anyhow, so it had to be faster. Don't put these curtains, but it's here in the memory. This is just to see if things are in the right PowerPoint. Well, back to the subject at issue. What happened in this case of Dupont? Dupont needing to sell, no, not needing, it's normal. They sell its products to Europe, leaving USA. DuPont goes and says, in fact, I will export, placing a price quite low.
And the profit will be low here in the US. And then I'm going to send this product to Switzerland, where tax is also low. So I'm just going to select the taxable jurisdiction and in a way that is beneficial to me. In the case, it was Switzerland. And then in Switzerland, they just use, well, they just redistributed the products in the European countries. And that effectively their profits were much higher. And so the practice that they used did call the attention of the tax authorities in the US, and this is why an investigation was started. And then what happened was that the IRS, well, I asked permission to use this expression because when we see that there is a very a firm proof, especially in the criminal aspect or sometimes in passion. But that was really, as we say, this was really lipstick in the underwear. So actually, this was a memo in which it was said that the party stated, well, we're going to do this because by doing so, hardly this will be discovered. If they do that, we deny it. If you deny it, even so, it may be that taxes levied on this will be even more beneficial if we were going to use the correct price. So when the IRS got that proof, then they said, "Oh, Dupont, what can you tell me if it were a criminal case, or this is a bargain, a plea bargain, and then we're going to just move forward with this." It may have been that this was also considered a criminal offense, but this is not really my expertise. And when it came to the Superior High Court, the only or the only place that they had was a criminal department. But I said I didn't know that I had so much things to pay because I had to spend 1 year just judging all the criminal offenses. And then when I went to tax department, then it was much better because at least this was something that I was really something that I understood. But of course, you must have your own passions. And there are some people who love criminal law. But in my case, maybe because of my background as federal justice, for 24 years I've been a justice, first at the labor court and then in government. So I said, well, this tax is really something that I really appreciate. Since 1997, I have been studying it. And since then, I have had this passion. So the proof was there, and this is what serves as a reference when you refer to history. And when you speak about transfer pricing, this is not the memo that appeared in your book, but it was the previous one. I put an article that you reproduce in your book. Let's see. It was a Dr. Schwerer's paper. Let's see where it is. Well, again, the curtain. Sorry, sorry. I didn't want it. But anyway, it's here. That's a reference to the doctrine of Dr. Schwerer's. Okay, let's go. So now let's move on to the other case. This is the second chapter of my talk. Here, let's see. Well, in the US, this was regulated starting in 1968. Then Brazil spent 30 years, or it took Brazil 30 years to finally regulate transfer pricing. This is why Professor Capilongo showed very well how international tax law here in Brazil took some time to awake. It took some time to have such a selective audience like you here. You who discuss not only transfer pricing but also the international treaties is with regard to taxation and many other aspects that call the attention with regard to international tax law. So then, the law was enacted in 1996, and then this law establishes four methods to calculate transfer pricing among binding parties. I'm not going into details with this because I asked Professor Schroeder, what's the audience? Well, they are highly specialized. So I said, I'm not going into details of each one of these techniques because, in the new law, there are two new techniques that I also have to update myself on. So far, there has been no case under it, but we always have to get updated now about the tax reform too. So I haven't seen the new law in detail. It was published or enacted last year. So among the three techniques to calculate the transfer pricing, what called the attention and which most of the part is used is the PRL, which is the reselling price minus profit. So this is the method that I'm going to call your attention to. Here, well, I don't want you to memorize these articles because I know that you know them. I just want to call your attention to what gave way to controversy to this. Is the end of item 1 of Article 18 when he says that in this case, in 60% will be deducted from the profit margin calculated on the sale price and from the added value in the country. So the law establishes that when you use the sale price minus profit, then you also have to include in the calculation the added amount. So this is a red flag for you. And then there was the IRS that published a normative instruction establishing a remark in the formula. And this is precisely that change, which was published in 1921, and that is said that 2001, sorry. So it did not talk about the proportion or the input amount. It just mentioned the added value. Now the thing is, the the following year there is a new normative instruction that was enacted. Well, I still have to explain how it happened before, even though I know that you know them. So, in view of the law, when you use that method, in particular the resale price and the profit or PRL, so what were the existing possibilities? So the law established that in this particular case, when there is no industrialization process here, so you just get the product from that related company and then you just resell it here, then it was considered that the profit margin was 20%. If in this case you're going to get that product as an input and then you manufacture it here, so you process that input to produce a new product here, then the profit margin would change to 60%. But again, you can deduct, you can reduce the added value as a result of that manufacturing. Now, according to the normative instruction 243 of 2002, it changes what was in the previous normative instruction. So suddenly, it also created the criteria of apportionment, which, in my opinion, is not really based on the main normative instruction. And a secondary norm, as we all know, has to explicit whatever is in the law. It cannot bring new requirements or not, nor restrict anything at all. The normative instruction is just to make things clear about the enforcement of a certain criteria. So in view of this, then there is this deadlock. So considering what was in the law, what we had in it was that the calculation formula. So instead of considering the product amount, I remember I really insisted on putting it here. So now there is a new criteria of apportionment according to how much, to what extent the input was there in the product. And the answer we gave in the first group was no, negative. So that was clearly violated the principle. I even say that according to the arguments posed by the IRS, was really reasonable because they say, well, sometimes the input that was brought to Brazil that represent the minimum amount in the final product, and then in this case we adopt that in the amount of the amount of the product. So I admit that that is a valid argument, but it is just for the law purposes because it cannot just be implemented because there is it's not supported, it's not backed by the law. Well, there are some other details. So I don't know if whether I have time to go through them. Okay, so for example, the rapporteur vote was to keep the interpretation that was made by the Federal Regional Court of the Third Region in São Paulo. But then, when I asked you to see it, I also considered the legality of it. I said, we cannot just accept the foundations that the IRS is submitting because they must be supported by the law. Because we know that the principle of legality is not only at the base of the tax law, but also of our Constitution, Article 5. And more is strictly saying it is also in the tax sphere. So how can I admit that the lender will have no legal grounds to say how they're gonna charge me? So I must have legal basis in a formal way, which is the law, and not just as normative instructions, right? So I submitted those grounds, and then the group of justices accepted them, the two other colleagues accepted it, and the rapporteur also adopted these arguments. So, you know, the groups of the Superior Higher Court are formed by 5 ministers, but in that case we were only 4 because Minister Regina was did not participate in that judgment. She participated in the third or or the first. I don't remember, but it was not. It's just based on the declaration. So, but there was a content of decision for that, and because this was at the ordinary level, so in the instance, so this is why there was an impediment for her to participate in the decision that we made. So she could not participate in that decision. We were four justices, and then the decision was that to reverse that. Well, I accept that because I said that there were distortions in some cases, and when I reread Professor Schroeder's book, I said I agree with this, I do not agree with that. But now review the argument, I thought, well, yeah, actually, it could really cause some distortion. But this is not really a foundation for you to accept that request if it is not supported by the law. And this is what effectively happened. It is also important to say that all of this that I said was based on line 9430, and especially because of the amendments made under another law that is on the slide that happened year 2000. Then in 2012 there was another law amendment made. It changed the profit margin and established all the parameters for that, and these parameters were not only a rate, and then it also changed the way of how proportionality was considered, but this is only from 2012 onwards. Back in 2002, if this was not the case, off the top of my head, this is what I remember. So that lawsuit had to be judged according to the effective law. I also used the a reason that was explained that was also established in another provisional measure, and the government was really confessing, is the lipstick in the underwear of Le Dupont, you know, because of the memo, was also showing the reasons of the government when they justified the change, the need of a change, because they explained that the normative instruction had a very strong um, argumentation for that, because the big question there was whether the law could really support that interpretation given by the secondary norm. So this is why we interpreted it this way. When I say we, because this is a collegiate decision of the first group of the Superior Higher Court. These are other decisions. Just to give you an example, after 2022, we also judged for the first time the merit, and then it returned to the group, and then I bring decisions here of Minister Manuel Hart, who was called at the time when the position was still vacant, and then Mr. Regina Elena, and this is 2024, and she judged it according. Well, this was decided in 2024. Now, the good news that I wanted to bring to you, I know that you'll follow all of this. The thing is that last year, Group 2 practically, well, the decision was made in September 2022, and 1 year later, it was judged in October 2023. And then the second group judged a case that is very identical to the previous one. And it was identical in terms of factual reality, the foundations, and the basis that are used. And then, in view of the situation, the second group made a different interpretation. They said, well, this normative instruction dated 2002 is based on the law. It just explains what is added value of the product and so on. And then it brings a formula sometimes can represent 3 times more of taxes to be paid by the company. So it showed that this was possible. But how come? Because the IRS had written that normative instruction following strictly what was in the law. So I'm not here criticizing a decision of another colleague. But the things that the case was judged, I am convinced of what I did. I'm speaking of the past, and I like to say that I am an old-fashioned justice. And there is another case that I'm not speaking of uh, cases to be judged. And here in academia, I can say very respectfully that I don't see any legal grounds for the decision taken by the second group because they say that that is one normative instruction but that will be interpreting the X way and that is correct. Well, I don't think it's really like that. So for the old-fashioned people just like me, I like to say that we are here to see what is going to happen in the next episodes. Today, people don't really watch soap operas, so they don't have to wait for the next episode because now everything is available on streaming, and then you can marathon seeing the series. But in the past, we didn't have things in streaming, and we love soap operas because they were very good. I confess that the last soap opera I saw was Avenida Brazil. After that, I think that there was no other soap opera that was really good. I'm sorry for the authors, but this was the last one I saw. So here we have scenes of the next episode. And what are these scenes? As our main collegiate is going to adopt, which attitude was going to be taken by this collegiate in view of this? Because there is a basis for discrepancy or disagreement, especially in the second group. The company has submitted embargoes and they have already been accepted, so meaning they are now being processed. And there were manifestations from the opposite side, and we also have our colleague who will also take this matter for discussion in the first session. And I believe that the debate will be very heated, and then because of the position of the first group and then the position of the second group. If you see those sessions of the Superior Higher Court, and that is a section, not a session. So you know that we meet every Wednesday, every other week. So now let's see when they're going to put this in the agenda. And Professor Schroeder, once I was here in Sao Paulo, and he asked me to come here to this Congress, but I was really bothered. Well, it did annoy me because I was not able to come here on Wednesday because I had a meeting of the first section of our court. So there was a specific case that we were judging. I don't know if I can really tell you about it. Let me just say it. So whether, well, these cases had already been considered final, and I was still discussing this topic 69, and whether how the stock option will be taxable and the service tax related to CSLL when it is presumptive profit. So all the discussions are very relevant. This is why I said that I could not come here on Wednesday. And I yesterday I could not really come because in tax reform you must have a lot of research done. I'm also professor of the University of Brasilia and UNDP. So there We also received another professor. I saw that he was here on Wednesday. He was going to speak about the tax reform, and I was one of the coordinators of that event, so this is why I could not miss it. And this is why I could only come today. So I do regret have not having been able to come here before. But let's see, the scene of the next episode are about to come. But of course, I do have to tell you about the law 2023, which is very recent. So with this, we try to get closer to the OECD model. So the Brazilian turtle that we had, the parameters that would lead to something unfeasible, something sometimes addressing simplicity, now cease to exist because now we are getting closer to the OECD model. And now let's see how things happen. But the motto of this law is what I ask excuse to Professor Schroeder to read a phrase and then a dialogue that I had or a conversation that I had with him. He will understand why I want to do this. In this case, what is this sentence? I know it by heart, but I don't want to make any mistake. This is why I want to read it. The sentence is the difference between debt and taxes is that debt does not get worse every time the Congress gets together. And when the Congress gets together, taxes get worse. Now, what was the conversation I had with Professor Schroeder? I think that I was leaving Brasilia. Then I posted him the message. Straightforwardly say yes or no. Do you consider that law of 14 of 2023 improves the system to tax and transfer pricing in Brazil? He said, I cannot be so objective. I laughed and said, okay. And then, but he was objective. He said, it makes it better because it harmonizes with other countries. So the group can adopt this for all subsidiaries, but we have to seek simplicity. So I understood that it does make things better. So this is why he I would say that that sentence that I read you before does not apply because the law did not really get worse. Well, with this, I would like to close and thank you for attention. I still have 3 minutes.
Passo a palavra.
Now I pass the floor to Professor Raquel Novaes, has remarks. L- Chairmans of the table, Excellence, Dr. Ricardo Maris de Oliveira, he doesn't like to be called doctor, but he will have to accept it here. Well, Professor Celso Capilongo, the Minister Gurgel de Faria, good afternoon. I will start thanking the invitation of IBDT to be here at, in this table panel, enjoying this company. Dr. Ricardo Maris de Oliveira, in addition to be IDT chairman, this institute that fosters this congress we are hearing is an attorney at law that inspires all us tax lawyers. We want to be like him when we grow. Professor Celso Capilongo, director of this university, that makes us so proud in the tax law area, the center of studies, and we are proud, even those who did not come to this school academically wise. And Professor Minister Gurgel de Faria, well, this minister, you could see why it's something important for attorneys to have a case examined by this minister. He gained his reputation by all those that work in the area, prosecutors, attorneys at law, because he's a deep knowledgeable in the area, and also because he admits he likes the subject matter. So I thank this opportunity. The subject. I loved the idea of dividing. I don't know if I'll be able to talk, but I promised during the next ones to adopt the subject of division. But I will start saying, trying to comment both decisions, a bit this divergence that the minister has talked about both decisions on the subject matter AN 423, introducing first an introduction, first part, and then I will talk about the second part where I'll talk further, and I can do easily because I'm not subject to Loma. So I'm quite at ease. Well, the legality legality of the normative ruling is well known within the tax environment of companies, and uh, in the Supreme Court, the first rulings it receives after 20 years of litigation. It's a debate with effects where 9959 law was effective. As the minister mentioned, the change No. 430 Act reduced PL 60 resale price minus profit for export PRL for the importer that bought important result, and this was the method introduced where the importer would add the product, the production process, and the end product would be sold, resold. By 012, the law 12715 revoked the 9959 law, closing therefore, at least for the future, a litigation surrounding the legalization of the normative rule that regarding that was a problem for the taxpayers during 15 years. Recently, previous laws they were all revoked by the law 14596, fostering the convergence of the Brazilian system to the OECD system, incorporating the principles of arm's length being incorporated. It might seem a bit late to talk about a normative ruling that was revoked 12 years ago, but what might seem the opposite at first sight, the subject matter is extremely relevant and important to understand the normative ruling role in transfer pricing, and very current, and it will be even more when Brazil's system will waive abandon closed concepts supporting the previous system and start now with open concepts brought by the new law, where the legislation invokes the executive branch during all the text of the law to integrate this text with regulation, laying down the role of a normative rule in a system where legality is a maxim in the establishment of quantitative aspects of the text is extremely opportune, pedagogical, and preventive regarding conflicts that might arise. Sometimes a system that we had in the past held rules of good quality. I don't know if this is a appertaining question, but OECD came here to map our system, and together with the Inland Revenue in 018 enacted an extensive report condemning our system and attesting that did not meet the arm's length principle because it's fixed margins. But it was what we had in our law, And in spite of the deviation of normative instruction North 943, Brazil is building the the learning curve in a subject that can be secular, as mentioned, concerning ministers in other countries, but according to experience, it's not even 30 years. Therefore, well, now following the exam of decisions regarding the subject, I, in an effort to synthesize and summarize, we managed to identify some points, joint points, and points that we differ, divergency. The first point, common point, is both decisions. They start with thought, the normative ruling by for applying the normalization on the calculus of the transfer prices. It has in thesis a better method for, or to say, as it divided from what imported content and imports and made the methodology to levy within only the imported share. Based on this point, I can identify which is convergent. Both decisions are antagonic in both conclusions. The first group in vote started the subject in a vote conducted by His Excellence, understand that in thesis the system is better. It was not the system of the law. It was not, as said before. And the law should not, let's say, a normative ruling should not improve the law. Following this line, efficacy to legality, choosing for two, for three normative ruling content. Conversely, the second group, backed up by the reporter Hubble, and with a certain interpretation that, in the light of the purpose of transfer pricing ruling, ended by understand the normative ruling valid because it had the capability of meeting better the purpose of transfer pricing control. So the increase brought by it in the social contribution on law on profits and tax was not undue, and the vote by the judges, by recognizing the difference in the wording between the regulamentary act and the legal act, invokes there and give efficacy to the standard. The normative ruling invokes the concept of legality that was enough with decisions by the STF Supreme Court in some situations when we had some assumptions. First one, when we have a clear delegation to the executive branch, and what is examined is the constitutionality of this delegation and a dialogue established with the product of integration, which is the regulating act. Second, by delegating, it clears quantitative and qualitative maneuvers in situations regarding flexibilizations of the rates for taxes. The law always has those deemed valid by the STF. It always has the law a cap, maximum cap, and the executive branch can make it flexible. And tax matter delegation is related to extra fiscal scenarios as the test of sufficient legality. Decisions by the STF approach dialogue between the tax law and the regulation takes place in terms of subordination, development, and how they complement. ADI 518 report by Minister Roger Verber and others might be quoted following this slide. Subordination is to delegate with pre-definition of maneuvers to be complied by the executive branch during the regulation, the development and meeting purposes and maneuvers that are found within the law. And finally, to complement with feeling, feeling the bridging the gap left by the legislation to the executive branch that calls it so the executive branch to act. None of the assumptions that Avenia deemed important and relevant for meeting the concept of the legalities present in this scenario. Therefore, starting that law 930 does not have any calling to regulation. The method definition does not have any delegation. Therefore, is as close is the text is so close that it contemplates a formula of the content. And I asked to borrow the transcription that the minister made, but I think by heart formula is quite simple.
There is a thematic average of the resale prices, and then you deduct certain elements to reach the net price of sale, and then you deduct another two elements, the added value in the country and a 60% profit margin on the difference. So that's the margin. It is absolutely self applicable. Right or wrong, did it meet the purposes of the law? I don't know whether this question applies to the one who created it. But the method of the law, when the policymaker had a logic to design it like that, as it was explained by minister. So for the policymaker, when the product was imported, then it was incorporated into the manufacturing process to another one, and resale was just one product. This is why there is a need to deduct the added value or the country added value, and this is complemented by the profit margin of 60%, which is three times more the margin of a simple resale. When you perform the apportionment according to normative instruction, and also to separate the portion that was imported, so there is a fiction there because the product that was resold has two resale elements, the product imported product and the national product. Then, when you have this fiction and you do not really establish any comparison to that, to the production tax law and the margin of the resale as normative instruction established, apart from illegality, we also have situations that are the same situations that are treated differently. Because when the taxpayer resell it out of the production, then they have a 20% margin. Taxpayers resell it according to their production, then there's a 60% margin. And this makes a big difference because nominal margins are levied on the full amount, and then they become a 25% increase on the resale and 150 in the resale of the remanufacturing process. So proportionality here just has to equal the basis. However, the normative instruction kept this difference. So apart from producing illegality, it also produces an economic inequality in treatment, and this encourage manufacturing here in the country. So it produces a deformation, a Frankenstein. And this is why levels 12 and 715 were introducing proportionalization into the system. It just made margins equal regardless of the destination and whether it was just manufacturing process or reselling of the product. So something that is clear in both decisions is in the fact that while the first group understood that the method was legitimized only when it was in the law, included in the law, and the second group understood that somehow implicitly the method was described and the normative instruction was legal. So the normative instruction was only meant to avoid conflict. And then, respectfully, I just would like to say that the second group decision was still missing. The law not only brought proportionalization, but by doing so, by changing the logic of the previous law, it also legitimized the method of apportionment under the law, but it also balanced the system with equivalence of margins. So from simple resale, it went to sale according to the production. So then eliminate illegality and the effect of unequal treatment given to the products. I'm sorry that I have exceeded my time. Thank you. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Raquel. Minister Celso de Mello wrote that a new law innovates. If it doesn't do that, it's not a law. And all the discussion about the PRL, we can see that both ends fight and then they bring economic grounds for this. But the policymaker simply corrected it. When he changed the original writing of this law, he showed an innovation. This means that what the normative instruction wanted or was exactly that. Sometimes I'm really amazed to see how issues just get extended. We need a very brief and efficient solution. Something that takes into account this fact, just change the law. As you said, the normative instruction does not correct any law. It is not meant for that. It, what is of interest that the law showed clearly that there was something new. Can we close, Professor? Let's close the 10th Congress. I would like to thank the Dean of the Law School, Mr. Capilongo, with his busy agenda. He came here to give us the honor of his presence. It's really an honor for the Institute to welcome you here. So, our appreciation for all your help and support. And Minister, you are among the tax professionals of that enjoys highly appreciation and admiration from all of us. And this is an institution that seeks improvement of the studies of legal or law, tax law. And thank you very much for all the help that you have given to us in order to welcome you here too. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm Professor Raquel, the same thing. And by closing this Congress, I just would like to show my appreciation to some who are here. Some others are here, some others not. I would like to thank Shrere and Luis Flavio, Rodrigo Maito, They were members of this planning committee, and you worked very well. Well, I see that you work very well because you didn't ask me anything. I didn't have to solve anything, even though I'm the president of the institute. And you worked very well with this brilliant commission. Thank you. Also, we have to thank our secretary Cerny, Cecilia representing all of them, and all the girls who are working here at the reception. They've been working with us for many years, Mauro. And also, I would like to thank the interpreters who allowed us to have this communication with people that speak another language out of Portuguese. And Isadora, are you there, Isadora? Isadora Coutinho. She's our researcher. Well, IBDT has this vocation to develop or to provide opportunities for development of the young people. And I heard that Isabella or Isadora devoted a long time to planning this Congress. So she's a person who really dedicates a long time for the Institute. But she's also a successor of two other previous researchers. They are all here. I'm not going to mention their names, but today they are professors at the Institute. They are course coordinators too. And they are people who were started while they were a student at law school. And then they also went to visit us in our headquarters, and they contribute a lot to it. So, Isadora, you are one of the last remnants of these old researchers. So, thank you very much. So, the Congress is closed. We are very happy with this. And next year we'll be here again with another Congress on Brazilian tax law. Thank you very much, and see you then.